Elise Fisher gripped the steering wheel tensely as she guided her second-hand sedan along the winding country road. Towering pine trees flanked either side like mute sentinels, their dense branches blocking what little sunlight filtered through the heavy, overcast sky. She had been driving for hours without encountering another vehicle. Not that she was eager for company out here in the wilderness. She briefly glanced at the sat-nav, torn between impatience to be rid of this place and reluctance to face what awaited. Her parents' sudden disappearance 6 weeks ago had left her lost and alone, drowning in a flood of sorrow and questions, with no answers in sight. The police investigation had turned up nothing. Their idyllic family home, now, just an empty shell, filled with lingering ghosts. Against her wishes, the courts ruled she was too young to live by herself, and thus she found herself on this desolate journey, departing the only city she had ever known for the isolated Whispering Pines, children's home located deep in the remote backwoods. She doubted any caring foster family would volunteer to take in a troubled 17-year-old with so much unwanted baggage. At least here, she could continue her independent online high school studies and figure out her next move once she turned 18 in a few months. The sat-nav beeped, signaling her arrival. Elise braked and peered through the fogged windshield at the sprawling gray edifice, looming ahead amid a sea of sentinels. Whispering Pines was aptly named. A constant rustling whisper seemed to emanate from the forest, as if the trees themselves hosted some dark undercurrent. She stepped out into the waning daylight, gripped by a strange sensation that invisible eyes were watching her every move. The orphanage was a decrepit 3-story structure of crumbling stone that had not seen repairs or care in many years. Crumbling gargoyles leered down with expressionless faces from the parapets. Blackened windows, like empty eye sockets, stared vacantly. A gust of wind moaned through the skeletal trees, sending dead pine needles swirling around her ankles. She reached back into the car for her solitary suitcase and backpack, feeling her unease solidify into a brick in her stomach. This place felt not just old, but ancient, as if bearing witness to untold secrets buried beneath the soil and worm, gnawed bones. Suddenly impatient to be away, she strode up the winding pathway through an overgrown wilderness that was once a lawn. Vines smothered the foundation, while brambles clawed at her jeans like grasping talons, attempting to pull her into the earth. Dead brush crunched loudly underfoot, the only sound in the ominous silence. Reaching the massive oaken front doors, she raised the rusted knocker and let it fall with a dull clang that reverberated hollowly within. Minutes passed without reply, yet she sensed unseen eyes, evaluating her still. Finally, shuffling footsteps approached from within, followed by the grinding of locks and bolts. The door creaked open a crack, revealing a sallow-faced man in his 40s, regarding her without warmth. Miss Fisher. His tone was as welcoming as the gloomy weather. She nodded mutely, struck by how haggard and drawn he appeared, as if this place had leached all vitality from his soul. "I'm David, the caretaker. Come in. Let's get you settled before nightfall." He pulled the door wider to admit her passage just as a bone-chilling howl rose in the distance, rising to an unearthly crescendo that prickled her skin. David's lip curled in a faint sneer. Pay the forest no heed. Its tricks and whispers merely stir wild fancies. Elise dragged her case over the threshold with difficulty, feeling as though she were crossing over into a realm beyond ordinary comprehension. The heavy door boomed shut behind her like a portcullis, snuffing out the fading light. She found herself enveloped in a gloom, alleviated only by flickering gas lamps. set into the old stone walls. Their unsteady glow threw looming shadows that seemed to writhe and distort along the gloomy corridors, stretching endlessly away. This way. David pointed brusquely down a flight of rotting stairs into the nether regions. She followed with trepidation, her footsteps echoing in the crushing silence. The chamber beneath was a crude dormitory of bare bunk beds lined up in regimented rows like coffins stacked 4 high. A frigid draft whistled through cracks in aged foundations, stirring her hair like ghostly fingers. David gestured brusquely. "Take any vacant bunk. Supper will be at 6, then lights out by 9 sharp. Rules are posted. Read them well. Any questions, ask the prefect. He'll show you around tomorrow." With that brief welcome, he disappeared back up the creaking stairs without a backward glance, leaving her alone in the gloom with only her thoughts for company. Elise dropped her case on the lower bunk of an empty space, taking a moment to embrace the solitude. She tugged a photograph from her pocket, tracing a fingertip over her parents' smiling faces, willing them to send her a sign. But there was only the hollow whistle of the gloom, beckoning her into its smothering embrace. With a sigh, she stowed the photo safely away once more and set about unpacking what little she had salvaged from the wreck of her old life. The dormitory was eerily silent, but for an odd scraping, like gnawed fingernails, clawing at hollow doors from the other side. She shivered, a surge of loneliness gripping her heart, as familiarity faded behind, replaced by this ominous unknown. Yet already, her determination was crystallizing into stone. She would not rest until the ghosts of her past were laid to rest, one way or another, even if it meant delving into places where none dared tread and dragging horrific truths, screaming into the light. Supper was a silent, solemn affair. 10 other orphan children of varying ages sat huddled together at a long wooden table within a cavernous dining hall, picking at thick porridge and stale bread beneath the flickering glow of gas lamps. Nobody spoke or made eye contact. Elise sat alone at the edge, observing their shuttered expressions and drawn postures that betrayed experiences beyond their years. Something terrible had occurred here to leech the light from their young eyes. Afterwards, David herded them upstairs with brusque efficiency to clean teeth by a communal sink. Elise noticed several scrutinizing her covertly, perhaps curious about the new arrival, yet none spoke up. At 9 p.m. precisely, he flipped the last gas lamp, plunging them into pitch-black void. She lay awake for hours, listening to the creaks and groans of a structure settling into dreaming, fancying whispers in the rustling pines beyond. Finally, sleep claimed her, yet brought no escape, only confusing nightmares of reaching hands emerging from fathomless shadows. The next morning, a gaunt teenage boy with lank hair introduced himself tersely as Nathan, the appointed prefect. He conducted a brusquely efficient tour, rattling off facts in a monotone about the building's 150-year history and daily regimen with all the enthusiasm of a corpse. Yet, behind his studied indifference, Elise sensed intelligence and perception that had survived despite this place's efforts to smother their young souls. She paid close attention, noting structural weaknesses and obscure nooks that could be investigated later in private. Something sinister had transpired here beneath the facade of normalcy. The orphans' abject compliance and David's cold demeanor hinted at long oppression. But there were no visible locks or bars. What unseen chains bound their spirits so utterly? She was determined to lift the veil, no matter the cost. even if it meant delving into places where none dared tread and dragging horrific truths screaming into the forsaken light of day. That evening, Elise sat alone in the gloomy dormitory, scribbling notes by candlelight, reviewing what she had observed during Nathan's tour. The creaks and cracks of settling woodwork created an eerie accompaniment to her musings. A single page was already half filled with questions, connecting invisible threads between strange occurrences. But many frightful mysteries remained unanswered. Footsteps approached, breaking her concentration. Nathan appeared, gazing down at her with an unreadable expression in his haunted eyes. "You ask too many questions for your own good. Newcomer, best to keep your head down and years passed in silence if you want to survive this place." Elise met his stare calmly. "Surviving and living are two different things. I didn't come here to simply exist. I need answers. What darkness haunts these walls that has everyone so cowed?" Nathan hesitated, as if weighing her measure. Then he slid onto the bunk, lowering his voice. "The forest whispers carry truths. If you listen, come. I'll show you. But step lightly. Some truths are best left buried." Elise blew out the candle eagerly and followed him up, creaking stairs into the cavernous entrance hall. A chill draft whispered through cracks in old stonework, stirring her hair faintly. Nathan led her down a shadowy servants' passage into neglected lower levels, not part of the tour. Dusty corridors twisted into the bowels like intestinal pathways through forgotten regions. Halting at an ancient oaken door, Nathan pressed a finger to his lips and gently pushed. Hinges creaked in protest as it eased open a crack, revealing darkness beyond. Elise peered through, adjusting to shadows. It appeared to be an ancient chapel, long fallen into disuse. Pews rotting, while stained glass cast kaleidoscopic patterns across the floor. Then she noticed movement. A small figure huddled in a far corner, whimpering softly. Nathan stepped through, beckoning. "It's all right. Jacob, I brought someone you can trust." The boy slowly uncurled from his fetal position, white face emerging from the gloom like a ghost's. He fixed haunted eyes upon Elise, sniffling back tears. "They're shouting again. I can't make it stop." Nathan crouched gently beside him. "This is Elise." Jacob shuddered violently. Terrible screams. "See, children crying for help as flames consume everything. I see their faces melting, smell burning flesh. Each time I close my eyes, the fire comes and they beg me to save them, but I can't." He dissolved into hoarse sobs, clinging to Nathan like a lifeline. A chill raised the tiny hairs on Elise's nape. Realization dawning. She crouched as well, holding Jacob's trembling hands firmly. "You're not alone in this. I hear whispers too, of secrets buried that long to be freed. Tell me everything you've experienced here. Together, perhaps we can lift this curse." Sniffling, Jacob began recounting strange events spanning the past year. Flickering shadows glimpsed from the corner of his eye, dragging footsteps in empty corridors, doors slamming of their own accord during the witching hour. Most chilling were demonic voices that shrieked and cursed in the dead of night, driving him to distraction. The boys' dorm hears them loudest. Nathan grimaced. "That's why I keep Jacob close. He's too sensitive for such terrors. But perhaps there's a reason he's chosen as their messenger. The spirits want their story told." A board creaked ominously behind them, sending Jacob jolting into Elise's embrace with a whimper. Whirling, she noticed nothing out of place. yet sensed unseen eyes watching in the darkness. Nathan hauled them to their feet urgently. Enough tales for tonight. Let's get you both to safer ground before we arouse. Unwanted attention. His tone suggested more sinister threats lurked in these shadows than mere superstition. Elise walked Jacob back to his bunk, exchanging a discreet look with Nathan that said much. He knew far more than letting on about events here. Soon she would coax out his full story, but first she needed allies. She could trust. Jacob looked like he could use a friend. And who better to guide her investigations than a sensitive conduit to the entities haunting these walls? In the ensuing weeks, Elise learned that Jacob possessed a psychic sensitivity far beyond the norm. He was attuned to dimensions invisible to ordinary folk, picking up impressions and emotions that plagued his fragile mind. Though shunned by others for his fancies, Nathan watched over him like a guardian angel. The lonely orphans found solace in each other's company, drawn closer by their shared experiences of these strange phenomena. Nathan proved an intelligent and insightful companion, filling Elise in on countless unexplained incidents spanning the orphanage's cursed history. Strange noises, shadowy apparitions glimpsed at the edges of vision, phantom cries for help in deep of night, all contributed to a pervasive atmosphere of unease. Yet the matron and David steadfastly denied anything untoward, punishing anyone who spoke of nonsense. One rainy night, another chilling episode occurred that shook Elise to her core. She lay awake with insomnia when hysterical screaming rent the air. Coming from Jacob's corner of the dorm, bolting over, she found him writhing and clawing at his nightshirt, shouting about being burned alive while unseen assailants cackled. Nathan struggled vainly to calm him, tears of frustration glistening on his cheeks. At that moment, Jacob's eyes flew open, pure white orbs, glowing eerily in the darkness, before rolling up into his head. His body shuddered violently once, before slumping still, choked gasps escaping bloodless lips. For a terrifying instant, Elise thought he had expired before his chest convulsed with a ragged inhale. Jacob, Jacob, can you hear me? She shook him, desperately, but received no response, his face an ashen mask. Nathan scrambled away, returning moments later with a damp cloth to lay across Jacob's brow. His breaths came shallow and uneven, pupils shrinking back to normal yet body limp as a rag doll's. The matron bustled in then, deducing Jacob having suffered another of his fits. Despite Elise's fervent pleas, she ignored Jacob's concerning state, coldly ordering everyone back to their bunks. A sense of grim premonition gripped Elise's heart. This place was slowly but surely draining the very life from its inmates. She steeled her resolve to uncover its sinister secrets before any more innocent souls fell prey. In the coming weeks, Jacob's condition fluctuated, his fits becoming increasingly violent, though Elise tended him devotionally during rounds of fever and delirium. She noticed his spirit fading under relentless psychic assaults. One night, he whispered to Elise, after a particularly harrowing episode left his small frame wrecked with exhaustion. They want me to deliver a message. For you. They say to find the book in the tunnels. He slumped back, losing consciousness, but not before Elise glimpsed a tormented intelligence flickering behind glazed eyes, begging her to finish the task he could no longer bear. The next day, Jacob seemed slightly improved, yet remained bedridden per the matron's orders. As Elise tended him, Nathan sidled over quietly. We must unravel this curse before it claims another soul. I have something to show you after lights out. That night, Nathan led Elise stealthily down the servants' passage once more into shadowy lower levels. His flickering oil lamp illuminated twisting corridors, hewn from stale earth, forgotten annexes of some ancient design, cobwebs, veiled archways, leading to netherworlds unknown. She shuddered to imagine what unseen terrors might inhabit these primal caverns. Halting before a nondescript doorway, Nathan produced a brass key from his pocket, fitting it into stiff locks. This was the old wine cellar. Now, it's my secret workshop. He swung open the portal, beckoning her within. Elise gasped upon entering the large chamber, housing numerous artifacts, journals and evidence pinned meticulously to the walls. A massive corkboard dominated one side, labeled Whispers from the Pines, strewn with notes and newspaper clippings. Dating back a century, you've been investigating all this time without telling me. Nathan, this changes everything. He shrugged self-consciously. I needed all pieces in place before revealing my hand. Spirits forbid word of my adventures reach matron's ears. Producing a leather-bound tome from beneath a hidey hole, he passed it to her with somber care. This, I believe, is what Jacob's visions reference. Perhaps within these yellowed pages lie answers we seek. Elise opened the journal reverently, coughing as dust stirred from desiccated parchment covered in crabbed script. Squinting in lamplight, she began deciphering entries scrawled in archaic hand. Elise read eagerly by lamplight, deciphering the cryptic manuscript. The journal's anonymous author recounted building Whispering Pines, orphanage in 1890, as a philanthropic endeavor. Yet disturbing allusions hinted at darker motives beneath pious pretenses. A godly duty to raise discarded souls in his light, shielding them from sin's corruption. These innocent lambs shall be molded as I see fit, learning obedience through discipline, both blessings and curse. Elise shuddered at such chilling sentiments disguised as righteousness, but worse was to come. Entries chronicled increasingly unhinged episodes, betraying a tortured psyche descending into madness. Flights of bizarre religious fervor infected daily operations, overseen by the increasingly tyrannical founders Charles and Beatrice Gray. Satan's influences seek entry through idle tongues and insolent eyes. None shall escape my diligent hunt, rooting out impurities that threaten this sanctuary. Each transgression shall be scourged from tender flesh, frailties of the flesh purged in fire, as God commands. Horror dawned as Elise pieced together escalating abuses justified under zealous piety, living nightmares inflicted upon helpless victims with none to cry for aid. But righteousness has a breaking point, and the journal hinted at a terrible denouement approaching like a gathering thunderstorm. Demonic forces infiltrate even my most faithful, cunning serpents. Whispered poison turning lamb against shepherd. No matter. Their perfidy shall be expunged to save the righteous few. Tonight, the unworthy shall face divine flames, cleansing this place of their taint forever. Elise skipped ahead feverishly, terrified yet compelled to uncover the culmination of so much madness and suffering. Her blood ran cold at the final entry spanning that fateful night, scratched in a shattered hand, trembling with terror and regret. God, forgive me for what I have wrought in your name. The flames have consumed all, innocent and guilty alike. Their tormented screams will haunt me into hell. Beatrice, what have we done? My mind has been unbound, demons unleashed that none can restrain. I see now the darkness in my own heart. The rest dissolved into disturbing scrawls and ramblings, a broken psyche howling its anguish to an uncaring void. With trembling fingers, Elise closed the book, yet its horrific revelations echoed on in her mind. She turned to Nathan aghast. An orphanage, founded on madness and tyranny. How many innocents fell to that man's malignant delusions before it burned? Small wonder this place carries such a curse. Nathan nodded grimly. I pieced the whole tragedy together from records. That fire claimed over 50 lives, orphans and staff alike. All perished screaming in an inferno started by the unhinged cult leaders, seeking to cleanse their flock. But some say not all souls crossed over that night. A chill raised gooseflesh on Elisa's arms. The spirits of those poor children, trapped between worlds by such a violent end. No wonder they linger, desperate to have their stories told and justice found. Footsteps echoed distantly in the tunnels, sending them shooting to their feet in alarm. We must away lest our activities be discovered, whispered Nathan tensely. He doused the lamps, plunging them into inky blackness, lit only by a distant exit sign, glowing spectrally in the void ahead. Elise allowed herself to be guided silently through the warren, navigating by memory and intuition alone, as unseen presences seemed to crowd the choking tunnel. Finally, torchlight spilled into the cellar, guiding them safely to its familiar sanctuary. Once more, catching her breath, Elise turned again to Nathan with fierce new resolve. No more will their suffering be secret. We must discover the full truth of this cursed place, no matter the cost, for the souls crying out and our own. Over ensuing nights, Elise and Nathan pored over records and testimonies by candlelight, connecting disparate pieces into a disturbing mosaic. The scope of abuse under the cultish founders expanded beyond imagination. Victims numbered in the dozen-spanning decades of callous rule until that fateful night's inferno. Yet many questions remained. What truly drove the Greys to such depravity? How had their institutions evaded secular justice for so long? And more urgently, what unfinished business kept those tortured spirits anchored to this mortal realm? One evening, as they pored over dusty ledgers bearing the house's early registration records, a brittle page caught Elise's eye. Peeling it open, gently, she gasped, two familiar faces staring back from sepia tones. Nathan, these records date to 1910. Look, could it be? Her friend leaned in, eyes widening in stunned recognition. Your parents, what in God's name brought them here all those years ago? Trembling, Elise slowly gathered the implications. Somehow her family had crossed paths with Whispering Pine's dark secrets before, holding answers to her own mysterious tragedy. At long last, she felt glimpsing a direct connection, and with it, new hope that this curse's grip might finally be broken. That night, unrest plagued the orphanage, like a malignant presence. Elise tossed fitfully, dreams disturbed by formless terrors seeping in from beyond. Amorphous shadows coalesced into shrieking specters, lunging at her with taloned hands. She bolted awake, drenched in sweat, panting for air, yet still half entrapped within nightmare's grip. A keening wail pierced the gloom, coming from Jacob's corner. Elise scrambled over in alarm, shaking the boy gently. Jacob, can you hear me? His small frame convulsed violently, limbs pulled taut as a bowstring, eyes rolled white beneath fluttering lids. Froth bubbled at his blue lips, curled back in a soundless shriek. Nathan burst upon the scene, prying Jacob's teeth apart as he began choking. His entire form shuddered like a live wire, muscles locked in rictus as unseen energies ravaged his mind. Elise fought back tears helplessly, distraught at being unable to shield him from such torments. After an agonizing interval, Jacob slumped limp, ragged gasps escaping his bloodless lips. Nathan laid a damp cloth across his brow tenderly while Elise sang a lullaby, willing his flicker soul back from nightmare's edge. Slowly, the boy's pallor receded, though dark circles painted his ashen face. His glassy eyes opened, fixing upon Elise fearfully. They're angry. Want us to see. A gate must be opened with that ominous message, whispered on shuddering breaths. Jacob once more lost consciousness into feverish dreams. Elise exchanged an alarmed glance with Nathan. Jacob's prophetic episodes suggested the spirits were ramping up psychic assaults, desperate to impart some urgent revelation. She knew time was short before their rapidly worsening condition. To lift this curse once and for all, a dire choice could no longer be avoided. That night, as specters of flame and shrieking entities infested even her waking mind, Elise resolved to take drastic action. Come dawn, she would force a reckoning within these very walls, consequences be damned. The orphans had suffered passively too long under sinister forces. No more. It was time to stare into the abyss and fight back with all her might. At breakfast, the orphans looked gaunt and hollow-eyed, clearly terrorized by restless spirits intensifying nightly assaults. Jacob clung weakly to Nathan, trembling almost ceaselessly. David surveyed them coldly, as always, without a hint of compassion. That evening, Elise gathered the shaken group in the dusty chapel ruins after lights out. By moonlight filtering through stained glass shards, casting kaleidoscope patterns, she revealed all she and Nathan had uncovered of this place's terrible secrets and her desperate plan to lay its vengeful ghosts to rest once and for all. A seance. Here, where it is closest to their lingering essence. With Jacob sensitively connected, we may be able to directly communicate, learn their unfinished business, and provide the closure they seek. Thus, their tether to this world will lift, and we all shall find peace. The others stared in apprehension, clearly doubting such a perilous gambit. But Jacob nodded shakily, willing to endure anything if it spared others his nightmares. Nathan placed a comforting hand on his friend's shoulder. I'll be right here with you, guiding our contact safely. They gathered in a tight circle, holding hands as Elise lit candles, casting dancing silhouettes amid the ruins. Nathan grasped Jacob's other hand gently, guiding him into a meditative trance. The boy's eyes slid shut, body going lax as his soul detached, drifting into etheric realms beyond. At first, an unnatural stillness descended over the chapel like a shroud. Then, a chill gasp swept through, raising gooseflesh as if some vast presence had materialized unseen. Jacob twitched violently as foreign energies coursed through him, mouth falling open in an unearthly rictus. A demonic voice, unlike any human tongue, issued forth in guttural rasps that clawed at sanity's fragile walls. We are Legion, our story will be known. Images assaulted their linked minds with impossible speed, flickering jumbles of faces, flames, seizures of pain and misery on an unimaginable scale. Jacob writhed and jerked, face contorting into a ghoulish mask. The psychic onslaught threatened to overwhelm his fragile mind. Yet Nathan held firm, guiding eldritch energy's flow carefully. Elise leaned in, envisioning herself a buffer, absorbing the brunt of their potent rage and sorrow. Speak. Our names. We were children, like you. The monsters burned. Us alive. Screaming faces swirled in a maelstrom, cold laughter and tortured wailing like a nightmare chorus, threatening to drown reason. Elise focused on one sole question through the pandemonium. Tell us your names. Give your tormented souls names, so we may honor your memories and lay your restless spirits to final peace. The presence within Jacob seemed to seize upon her words like a lifeline, frenzied energies momentarily calming. Slowly, images coalesced of singular souls, each imparting brief flashes of identity. Mary, Isaac, Charlotte, dozens of innocent names, erased too soon under cruel hands. Finally, a name whispered from blue lips in an anguished rasp. Sophia. My name was Sophia, and I will have vengeance. A piercing shriek tore the air, shaking dust from rafters above as the presence detonated from Jacob in a shockwave, throwing them all backwards. His slight body crashed to the floor with limp finality. Spirit released back to its mortal cage,